All right, so let's get started. Josh, you have over 25 years of experience working at companies like Bayer, like J&J, Razorfish, obviously LendingTree. Right now, you're 3-4 months in to your role at Pfizer, officially VP of Media and Performance, right?
Yes.
I'd love to just hear a little bit about your history and sort of what's brought you to this role, because it is a really exciting moment for Pfizer, an exciting moment for this team for Pfizer, but would love to just hear how you got here.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Yeah, so, well, a couple things. I mean, the 25 years sounds like so long, but, which I guess it is, which is just another way of saying that I'm just old at this point. I spent a lot of time going to companies, like you mentioned, Razorfish, Comcast, Bayer, J&J, now Pfizer. So, like, I don't know, I just seem to gravitate towards, like, small companies that just have no politics, easy to navigate organizations, and yet I end up continuing to take those kinds of roles. So, I get pulled in on these, like, transformation jobs. By the way, I hate the phrase transformation, but it's literally what every recruiter ever describes a job to me when they call me about it. And it usually comes in with, like, this remit of, hey, like, we're organization X, we need to change, consumers changing, digital's changing, all of these things. And so, similar remit of what happened at Pfizer was they had a call to come lead performance media, and then we're going to talk about performance media later. It led me to one question that I was like, wait, does it mean this? And we'll talk about that later. But yeah, my role typically is just going into these places, figuring out, like, how they're structured, what they're doing, where we can be better. I will say, you know, candidly, like, I've walked into one organization that I was like, wow, this place is really screwed. But, like, by and large, I get to places where it's just like, hey, you have an outside perspective, help us get over this, like, hump that we're trying to get to. So in my role now, I lead all the paid media channels and organic search, because I always end up leading organic search somehow. And basically just everything under, like, paid, programmatic, social search, video, all those things.
Just a few things. Just a few things. So I've had the pleasure and privilege of working within the pharma space for close to 20 years. So not quite close to the amount of experience you've had within the broader industry, but definitely within the pharma space. And I've always watched the work that Pfizer has done and just been in awe of the transformation. I'm going to use the word a lot, but in various shapes and forms, but of the transformation happening in patients' lives as a result of the work that Pfizer is doing. And obviously that was amplified during the pandemic with all of the vaccines and treatment solutions for COVID, but it keeps getting better, right? The recent campaign and efforts that you're doing to really transform and tackle the cancer healthcare crisis, and with your Outdo Cancer campaign, I think it's really, really inspiring. So I would love to just hear a little bit more. I know you're only a few months in now, but this is all a topic that we can rally around, certainly when it comes to cancer, right? One in three of us in this room, unfortunately, will be faced with cancer at some point in our lifetime. In this year alone, there's going to be 2 million new cancer cases identified. So it's something that I think we've all been exposed to. We know it's important, but Pfizer's really taking a stand and really going to try and transform the healthcare crisis. So I would love to just hear a little bit more about that. Yeah, so I mean, and like super depressing topic, but like important topic nonetheless. So yeah, I mean, Pfizer, there's a few things that are happening. I mean, obviously Pfizer's had a long history with a bunch of different conditions that we treat. Obviously the vaccine was a big tipping point moment for the company. But as we've gone down this path, like we've always had a big set of oncology brands. We acquired another company recently, it finally was approved. So like we're going all in on these treatment, or on these brands that are treating specific disease states or forms of cancer. And so, I mean, to your point, like there's a lot of passion in the company around this, all the way up from the CEO down to our organization. The premise behind what happened with the Super Bowl ad was it was actually in a couple of different veins. Like first and foremost, there was this. Well, first of all, like, does anybody in this room know, except for you, James, because you work at Pfizer? Does anybody know what Comirnaty is? Does anybody in here, well, actually, I don't want to ask, never mind, I was about to violate all of your HIPAA violations. Steph, I know, got you. Okay, it's the vaccine, but you don't know it's the vaccine because you got the Pfizer vaccine, or you got the J&J vaccine, or you got Moderna. And so it was this moment where the company realizes that, like, hey, the Pfizer brand should be out front, because Pfizer does stand for a lot of good things, science-based, a lot of science-based approaches to everything, just, again, a good brand. I tell this joke, sometimes it goes over, sometimes it doesn't. But if you think about how, like, a J&J operates, it's like when you think of J&J, you know their brands, but you also know J&J is this like trusted brand that you want to buy their products.
I make the joke because it's like their vaccine didn't go that same route. But I think for us, it's like when you think about Pfizer, like we want to be put in that same light. It's a funny joke. Come on, you can laugh. But we want to be put in that same light where, like, if you're going to a doctor and you're suffering from something, whether it's migraine, hopefully, I mean, God forbid it's cancer, but it's cancer, like whatever it is, like we want you to think of Pfizer first, and we want doctors to be thinking of Pfizer first as they start to think about what products they recommend for patients. So that was the premise behind, like, let's make a campaign that's branded around actually like Pfizer itself. It went into all different like shifts and pivots. And by the way, I was like a month in, so I had like a ringside seat to watching everybody work really, really hard. And then people were like, "Wow, it was a great Super Bowl," and I was like, I had nothing to do with it.
You can take some credit.
I was just like, I said thank you, but I did nothing. But what really like came out of that was like a continued refocusing of like, well, should we focus on these particular disease states or these? And then it just sort of got down to like, hey, we've investing all this money into cancer. We've gone from all this work on vaccine and COVID to now into cancer, and we're doubling down with the acquisition of Seagen, that like, we should probably put that out as our message. And it's something that, again, to your point on all those numbers, like it's going to, I mean, sadly it is going to impact somebody in this room, but it hasn't already, and multiple people in this room. And so how do we take the Pfizer brand, put it behind that, and really just get the message out of where we stand against it?
Very powerful. I know it's like a lot to drop on a Monday morning after the weekend we've all had, but it is really, really important, and I don't want to sort of gloss over it because that's what Pfizer stands for, right? And it's transforming all of our lives at some point, right? This industry is quite powerful, and the work that you and the team are doing is quite powerful, right? To connect the message with patients, with caregivers. I really geek out over that type of stuff because we've joked about it.
You should get some other interests.
I have plenty of those, but for the day job, and certainly as that translates, right, it's really about improving people's lives. You know, where I sit right now within Snapchat, we're really taking a moment to also kind of think inwardly and about the transformation, what's happening within social media, and the fact that, you know, social media isn't always a place for happiness traditionally, right? So we're really standing firm. You might have seen our recent campaign and activation, less social media, more Snapchat. It's meant to be a little bit jarring and spark conversation, but the idea here, we really want to spread happiness and joy, and we want to connect people with their closest friends and family. And when it comes to healthcare, we know that friends and family are really the core network that people go to when it comes to find trusted health information, when it comes to find recommendations. So I think there's a lot of synergies with, you know, what our teams are doing in our respective companies, whether it's through science, whether it's through connecting people and closest networks, wherever they might be on their healthcare journey. So I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. We're going to pivot. We're going to talk a little bit on transformation, but just, I think, giving a peek under the hood for folks that aren't as familiar with what's happening within the actual marketing organization at Pfizer. I know, under Drew's leadership, things have shifted a bit, and then certainly under your leadership, you're thinking about doing things a little bit differently. So we'd love to just share with the audience what's happening within the marketing organization.
So about 15 months ago, Pfizer hired its first ever global CMO. And like, I always scan the audience when I say that because literally, and somebody made a face. You think Pfizer had one, and you think because it's just like it's such a big company and it's such a brand 175 years old. Like, how did it never have a CMO? And the reality is, when it comes to pharma, it's a lot about the disease states and where you sit, and obviously like getting that recognition out to the patients, but also to the healthcare professionals. And so there's sort of this idea like, do you need a CMO when you have these amazing products that treat these disease states that people need treatments for? The answer is, by the way, it's no. I mean, yes, you do need a CMO. And so as Pfizer started thinking through like what was next for them, there was a couple things that came to play. So like Drew came on board and created this chief marketing organization. He took lots of parts that were already in Pfizer, so like business analytics, like advanced insights, obviously the media team that had already existed there, and put them all into one group with this idea that Pfizer had to get back to being more data-driven in its approach and more audience-based in its approach. And so to be very clear, like Pfizer was at the forefront of doing a lot of programmatic advertising back in the day, and then in 2019 went ultra-conservative because that's what lawyers do, and pulled back completely. So there was this period of time in which like we just stopped trying to reach out to patients in any sort of targeted way. And so Drew always quotes this stat. I don't know where his source is, but he says it with confidence, so I'm going to say it, that like 30% of the world's data is health data, and it's not necessarily harnessed to reach people or to message them the right way. But even like taking it down to like the sales organization, like if you have 5 minutes with a doctor, like we want you to give that doctor the right piece of information that's most relevant for them. And so like, what data can we feed you to get you to actually go in with the right page of the detailed script open? So there's a lot that goes into trying to figure out like how much data can we use, not only from a media standpoint, from a messaging standpoint with doctors, and then a lot of it goes down to also like consumer journey stuff. So like if you've ever gone to a consumer website or healthcare website, they're like 20 pages and they don't get a lot of traffic, and they're like a coupon, a copay card, a dosing information, like what's this drug gonna do to me? It's those kinds of things, and like we want to try to take more of an approach of like, how do we help you understand what you're dealing with from a disease state, how our product can help you, and how you then go get that treatment. Let's be clear, like we're not WebMD, and we're never going to be, and that's not our niche, that's not where we're going. But the idea that we have the right to actually provide more information to the consumer along the journey than we're probably doing now. And so there's a big shift around a lot of those things that has, by the way, nothing to do with media. It just gives me and my team better places to go, or better places to drive people, and better messaging to give them than just simply like a website on a page that may or may not lead to an actual script. So that's really those big areas of focus for us. Did I miss anything?
No, I mean.
I'm also supposed to, is Publicis here? They're not here, right? No, good, let's talk about them. So I'm also supposed to do in-housing. So like I end up doing this a few times. So we're trying to also control a little bit more of our own destiny and bring more of the hands-on activation in-house. It's going to be a longer road than what I've done in the past, and it's fine. Like I'm not going anywhere yet. And so but it's interesting again in that Pfizer didn't just say, hey, let's move away from our agency, which we've been for 25 years, that we're very comfortable with, to an agency like Publicis. And like all jokes aside, they're phenomenal, but they're new and they're learning us, and we're working with non-healthcare people on purpose because we want to have outside and different thinking. So that's all going well, but there is also a desire to say, hey, we want more of that expertise in the building. Like we want those hands-on keyboard people in the building, working with our marketing teams, working with your team, working with the brands to figure out like how do we get the most out of these things. And I could spend days talking about it, but I think that's another big piece of the transformation that it's different than what you see in other organizations where it's like, hey, we just need to embrace audiences more. Okay, like, by the way, not a bad mission, but like we're doing a lot in terms of the structure of the organization to actually live into that.
Very, I think, insightful for folks less familiar. I'm going to actually kind of go out of order because I think something that you said is a nice build. Hopefully this won't throw you off too much, and if it is, I'll take blame. I'm going a little off script. But I think what would be, when you talk about, right, working with agencies maybe that are not as familiar with healthcare, that have different perspective, that's super, super important, right? Because in the pharmaceutical industry in particular, there's sort of been this sense of let's just do what has worked in the past, right? Let's not rock the boat, let's not shake things up. And that's great that it's worked for you, but you're potentially missing pockets of patients, potential patients or caregivers, right? Like there's definitely room for innovation and to shake things up. And I have witnessed just in my, short time working with your team, how you're reaching audiences in new and different ways, kind of moving away from just traditional ways of reaching them. And then also using technology and just different product solutions, whether, we're exploring AR partnerships, figuring out how to use augmented reality to reach patients, educate them, engage with them in new and different ways. So would love to just kind of hear about more on the, I guess, media transformation side of things, how you're thinking about finding and connecting with patients using technology, different partners.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not. There's still a lot of work being done there, but I have some answers, obviously. I think first and foremost, it is a lot around the audience piece. Again, there was things we couldn't do because of privacy, but like the quick thing to do is say like, okay, we'll find people who are treating right now, and so there's a lot of internal debate on like if there's, and by the way, I'm going to make up some numbers because I don't know them, but if there's like 10, but I'm not that far off for the record. Like if there's like 10 million people treating migraines in the United States. I think that's more or less right. All right, thanks. Like, why is the audience size that we're looking at 50 million? Like, it feels like, wait, like how?
Fair.
And you start to, and it's, again, to your point, like, hey, if our product has better efficacy, if someone's coming off of one script, if there's issues with another product, if there's recall, if there's just a supply chain issue, like, let's grab those people because they're already in market. Now, I'm a big believer of purchase-based segments. It's the biggest signal that, like, yes, that person is in market to buy your product. That being said, though, like, there's people who don't treat. There's people who haven't even gone to the doctor yet. So, like, my philosophy philosophy is pretty much around like start there and then build around that. So I use the worst example. I think it's the worst example, but it's the cleanest example of like, I will target people who have bought Excedrin, because if you buy Excedrin, you obviously have migraines. Now, will you ever trip over to or would you ever make the move to a prescription drug? Maybe not. But the reality is, if you're taking Excedrin, you have really bad headaches, which are likely migraines, and so therefore, like, why wouldn't I target you with the message of what Nurtec does for you? So it's a lot around that area. So that's one big thing. The other thing too is we are getting back into the spaces because of the stuff we were missing out on with using healthcare data around like what people are on scripts, what doctors are writing scripts against us versus competitors, and trying to make like targeting models around those. So those are two of the big things. I talked a little about content as well. Drew's background is very much from the consumer world. So like Coke, Best Buy, Disney, Google, Google Verily. Was it Google or Verily? He was a Verily, yeah, Verily. So, oh yeah, you were there too. So he's got a wider background of understanding like all the good things that you can do in these places with, again, augmented reality or just like patient journeys, like with immersive experiences. I think that stuff's is coming. I just think it's harder to do in a healthcare space. So like, make no mistake, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. Don't tell Drew that. It's just, I think our balance is going to have to be with what does outside thinking give you, and what are the expectations that you set based on that. And by the way, like James, you said that yesterday, so I'm giving you credit for it. But we did a Super Bowl ad, and like we saw traffic come to the website, and we saw lifts and searches, and it was, by the way, it was successful against all the metrics we had put against it. But we set the bar really high, and there was a few metrics that were like I don't know if we got that one, and I think it's because we had a lot of people who again like thought, hey, Super Bowl ad makes sense for our brand, but gosh, the search numbers weren't what we thought they were. And you eventually have to have this weird conversation where you're like, well, it's cancer and it's the Super Bowl, and like I'm sure people were interested in it, but it's not like, hey, watch the rest of the Deadpool trailer. Like I'm sure they got a lot more search traffic than we did. But I think I think the balance for us is going to continually be, how do you push outside thinking while still balancing your expectations on what that performance will look like? Because it will be there, but it doesn't need to be en masse of what you experience is at other these or what the experience is for other big brands. And the reality is like, to get a patient on script, which is the most important thing. Let's just get that out of the way. Like if you're sick, you need treatment. But our products aren't cheap. I mean, U.S. healthcare. Sorry. So it's just a thing. You know healthcare sucks, right?
That's not a shocker.
Yeah, I'm not dropping any new knowledge here. So, but the idea, like we get somebody on script, and like that's very profitable for us. And so, like I just think like if you find the right mix of the right audiences, like it'll take care of the company financially, and we'll be able to reach more patients, get them on the medicines they need, and also still like do things differently than old pharma does.
Well, I love that there's somewhat of a challenger/innovator approach within the company, understanding it's definitely a very different model and sort of path to purchase than some other verticals. But I think you kind of hinted on this at the end of your answer here, which is like this concept of what is the North Star, and script, getting on script lift, refills, et cetera, it being hugely important. And that then signals to me sort of this question that we had chatted about, which is, what does really VP of Performance Media mean? Right? Performance can mean a lot of different things depending on your company, right? And this concept of brand versus performance, are they different? Are they, do they work together? And when we were prepping, you kind of had a very interesting perspective that I'd love for you to kind of share.
Yeah, I don't know if it was interesting, but it was perspective. So I have those two things. So the first is, all right, I'll start with the difference. So first of all, like someone asked me one day, they were like, what's the difference between brand and performance? And I said, well, it's pretty simple. The person who runs brand gets to go to the Super Bowl. The person who runs performance gets to go to like a local viewing party to watch the Super Bowl. and maybe you give them like the three things in the gift bag that you didn't like. Like that's where I end up. But like when you break it down, like I have a belief, as I'm sure many other people do, but the fact that these lines exist tell me that they don't, which is like everything is performance. And so when MediaLink called me about this job, they were like, it's performance media. And I was like, wait a second. I was like, do I get all the media, or do I only get the stuff that leads to some sort of conversion, which I knew in pharma was hard to do anyway. And I was like, so do I get connected TV? Do I get all of search, or do I just get the performance-based search? And the answer was everything. And that was a big difference, because I've walked into performance jobs where like, oh no, the brand brand budget's over here. And I'm like, well, what's the brand budget do? Well, it's driving our brand. Well, does it drive search? Does it drive mental awareness? Or mental availability? Like, what is it doing? Oh, it's driving someone to think about our product and then like be exposed to an ad and show up at a Walmart and buy it. Like, that's performance. The difference between the two is just how you measure it. So no, like I'm not going to measure, like to take a ROAS sucks, but like to take ROAS of like TV versus search versus programmatic, like it's always going to lose, but like where did it play a role in the journey enough for us to be able to actually go through that? And then when you think about the changes that we're making, is like, yeah, like we are going to be way more heavily invested in audience-based connected TV. We're not going to be, we're thinking about the upfront differently because we don't think it works. I don't think anybody in this room thinks it works, right? And so I think that there's no network people in here, right? No. Okay. So like that's the thing when I think about performance media. It's like you have this goal in mind. You have to just measure things differently. But every dollar you spend has to perform against something. And so the brands that break that down separately, I just think you're losing the impact of having all of your stuff together and like paying more attention to it as a holistic plan because you're separating those things out.
I'm in your camp.
Thank you.
And of one, but I'm sure there are other folks in here who would agree. It is everything works together, and looking at it holistically will only help improve each other together. All right, so we're going to have one more marketing-focused question, and then we're going to wrap with more of a fun off Pfizer. No, well, it's an important question.
It's fine. I'm just kidding.
Okay, you touched a little bit earlier on content and the importance of having good landing pages, websites that have robust information for patients, right? Not just the standard traditional copay, doctor discussion guides, et cetera. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you are thinking about content more holistically to make sure that you're getting folks what they need based on where they are in the journey. And this could be content from a paid media standpoint, organic standpoint, earned, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, so the short version is like we're updating. Well, no, it's updating. We're starting to bring in more data to be able to measure impact of exposure. So right now, the way most of our metrics are set up is around website visits, and yes, we've have some level of high value action pages that we deem like if you show up here, odds are that you're actually going to fill a script. And we do have like there's someone in that building or someone who measures these media models that can tell you yes, that is in fact true. Like X% of people who go to the copay card page end up going on script, and that's great. But like where I live or where I think about is all of those media, all of those times that you're exposed to media that you don't click on it, either A, because you don't click because nobody clicks, or like it's not a place you will click. So connected TV is a perfect example of that. And so I think about all those spaces that we're in, and you realize that like if we're not tying the metric back to those folks, we're missing this giant audience. And so to your point on content, it is a little bit yes on the website, but then it starts to go into like what are the creative units that we're building that are more than just like dog running across a field to the person and like some flowery message. It is around like what are we doing with the messaging that's in our creative, especially when it comes to our video. Can we use signals, and they're not that easy, but like signals of people who are on that journey from diagnosis to treatment, like what can we serve them to help them get there along the way? So whether it's information about like how to talk to your doctor about this, or what the potential side effects are, or like frankly again, like what is this thing going to cost you? Like making those steps easier and then surfacing that up in that moment, that's hard. I mean, it's very hard to do in a very heavily regulated, privacy compliant space, but it's not impossible. I mean, again, content and contextual exist, and frankly, they probably serve a good role for our space, but it's not the easiest thing to sort of pull together, but that's the plan, at least, is to try to do it in those ways.
We can always get better, right? Let's outdo yesterday, taking a page from Pfizer's book. Okay, so we're gonna, last question here, and this is, again, maybe not necessarily.
Is there Q&A also?
Yeah, okay. If we have time, we're gonna go,
3 minutes.
Okay, so we'll do this.
I feel like the last people took some of my time, though. That's fine. It's okay.
Okay. So outside of work, you're very passionate about a certain philanthropy and really trying to support efforts to raise funding for find treatment solutions for funding to help find treatment solutions for pediatric cancer. So I would love to just hear from you about your work, what excites you and inspires you about this philanthropy, and then also we're going to ask folks to help potentially.
Well, no one's asking us to donate. Let me be clear about that. But there's going to be a QR code if you want to donate. Great, but don't donate and ask me for business because I've had people do that. It never works. So I'm not kidding. So sorry. And by the way, so real quick, I'll be here for for a little bit, so if there's questions that we don't get to Q&A, because she said I only have 3 minutes, and now I'm probably down to 2, I'm happy to answer questions, and then I have some things I got to get out to, but I'll be around. So yeah, so I have a long-standing belief, like especially our industry is a great industry when it comes to just helping others, and we've had some amazing examples of people who have done that throughout their careers, whether it's helping kids like come through like college and getting transitioned, or like families who are in need, or people who are in need. And like the past 2 years, like we lost like 2 like awesome people in our industry that like helped sort of set that model. And so I just always believed that like we as an industry need to keep doing that and moving forward. So independent of that, 9 years ago, my family started an event for St. Baldrick's Foundation. If anybody's familiar with St. Baldrick's, I know somebody here is. They focus on research for treatments for pediatric cancer. Pediatric cancer gets 4% of federal funding. If, God forbid, your child gets cancer, you're going to get an adult treatment for that child. So imagine giving your child, instead of children's Tylenol, Tylenol. Like, and that just causes all sorts of problems for them in life. Except it's not Tylenol, it's chemo, so it's a little bit worse. So we started this a long time ago. We've had several family friends of ours who lost their kids to cancer. Robert was 17, Ethan was 15, Dominic was 9. And we do this community event in our town. We shave our heads, so yes, this all goes away at some point. It grows back really fast though, so like it's really low risk for me. But there's a lot of people who donate because they don't like my hair or that I can grow it so easily, and it's a vengeful thing, but I'll take all your donations. And so it's a community event. We do raffles, silent auctions, tickets. I mean, we have one of the largest events that St. Baldrick's has, and we are a tiny town in Pennsylvania, which if you ever seen a Hallmark movie, that's literally where I live. And so we've raised $1.6 million over the last 9 years, and it's a wonderful cause. But tying it back to sort of like where we sit as like people, like I just again like have a belief, like if you get, I'm dropping names and maybe you know them, maybe you don't, but like Sean and Nick were great people in our industry that like pushed forward like charitable and philanthropy and helping one another, involved in thousands and hundreds of foundations. And I've always felt like, hey, like when all this ends, and like I don't know who's coming to my funeral, like Steve will be there, he'll be dancing on the grave. I hope you guys don't talk about in-housing, but rather like, hey, like he gave time, he gave money, and it's just, I think that we have a responsibility as people in this industry who have a fun job at the end of the day to like actually give some time to give back. And I always tell people like it's so easy, like I'm not asking you to like shave your head, I'm not asking you to go like become a big brother, but like you have an hour a month that you could spare giving back to somebody. And I'll say one last thing, I know I'm way over, sorry. But I had this one guy, I sent out donation emails. I got this one thing back, $1,000 donation, which is quite high. And I called him, like, Simon, you just donated $1,000, you know that, right? He was like, yeah. I go, and I said, and I was being very honest about this. I was like, did somebody, like, do you have a kid? Like, do you have someone in your life has been impacted? He said, no. He goes, I don't do anything. He goes, I don't give back, I don't volunteer, I work all day long, I make money. And he's like, but you do something. And if I give you money, I did something. And so I always thought about that, like there's just such easy ways to do that. And so like it just always stuck with me that like, you know, when people say like, you know, what do I donate? I always say like, listen, first is a trick question. Like, what would you do if it was your kid, right? Like, what would you ask your friends to give? And then I tell people like, pick an amount that if you lost tomorrow, you wouldn't even notice it. For some people that's $10, for some people that's $10,000. And give that. Because again, I just think as an industry, we're so powerful and we could do a lot more to just sort of advance causes, so.
1,000%. There's always time for that, always time to give back. Thank you for the work that you are doing. Thank you for your time. Thank you to Brand Innovators. And then, one question?
There's a question. That guy's got a question.
I actually know who this guy is.
Whoa.
This is like the perfect person to ask the question.
Hi, Patrick Eisenberg, American Cancer Society.
Oh, hey. Jump right.
Love what you're talking about and appreciate your support from Pfizer. You just talked about donating treasure. We also talk a lot about donating time and talent as well. Maybe you can expand about how marketers in your industry can give just beyond maybe monetary, but give their talent and
just
time.
Take a turn. And by the way, just for the record, like I'm not a very evolved or amazing person, for the record. I mean, I'm quite good, but like, so don't look at any of this as me being some condescending guy on stage who's like, oh, like look at me, I'm so good. Like honestly, I've told people before, like I'm so thankful that we got involved in St. Baldrick because it actually made me look back at life and like, you know, I'm actually doing something and selling banners, you know, across the internet. So I do think there's a lot of things you can get involved in. I mean, the biggest things that like I've seen others do in our industry, and it does sort of answer your question, but it sort of doesn't, is like like, one is like, look, there's colleagues you could always just check in on. Like, there's people going through something right now, and people who are junior. Like, I know, like Sean and I used to do a lot around like helping people who are like just getting their career started, and like connecting to people, having them meet people, like people they would never meet. Like, I weirdly was able to meet people that I never had any business meeting, and it brought my career to a certain place. And the only reason I got that was because someone was nice enough to let me in a room. I'm sure they're regretting it now, but so I think it's a little bit of that. I think there's also, I think where you're getting at is there are lots of nonprofits that are looking for people with like web design work, social media experience. Like, find something you're passionate about and just send them an email and say, hey, like I work at Snap, and like I can help you guys with your campaign if you want. And like it's basically like you're just doing your job. You're just doing it for a nonprofit. So I think there's some easy. Those are, I think, the easiest ways to get involved. To me, the easiest is donating. But if you want to feel more fulfillment, like go do something like that.
Time, talent, treasure, right? There's all ways that we can give back. So I hope you're all feeling inspired. I'm inspired, certainly. Thank you for the time again. Thanks, Brand Innovators. All right, next session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.